Delighted that Rene Meulensteen, former Manchester United first-team coach, and Clayton Blackmore are both with me now to talk more about the great man. Gentlemen, a very good evening to you. And is that Clayton? Clayton is with me, and Rene's with me. Hi, Rene. I can see you now.
Hi, Mark. Hi.
Oh, Rene, it's good. I mean, you know, it's never good to talk on these occasions, but it's good as well because here was one of the world's greatest. When did you first hear about Sir Bobby Charlton?
When I first heard about him was obviously I grew up in Holland and we didn't see that much of English football at the time. I can always remember the FA Cup was always played in the first Saturday of May, and that was always shown on Dutch TV. And obviously Man United happened to be, in those finals a few times, but they always did a pre-run and a previous run. And that was sort of, you learned firsthand about, what Manchester United was about as a club. Because they went back in history, and obviously Sir Bobby Charlton was in one of those FA Cup wins. But that is the first time I sort of, got to know a little bit more about him. But obviously in my time at Manchester United, I've been very, very privileged and fortunate to cross paths with him on numerous occasions.
He, as a journalist, of course, and a broadcast journalist as I was, we were sometimes on the other side of the fence, but I always found Sir Bobby a very, very decent man and an iconic figure as well, but a very normal person.
Absolutely. He was such a gentleman, and you see everybody that pays tributes, you hear the words of, he was a giant of football. He was iconic for the club of Manchester United, etc., etc. And like I said, I had the fortunate circumstance to sometimes share, a taxi with him. I still remember I was the reserve team coach, and I took a sort of a mixed team of under 18s, a reserve team, to a tournament in Dallas. And so Bobby was the guest of honor to open the tournament, and also to give out the winner prizes at the end. And I ended up by sharing a taxi with him, and I had tons of questions, obviously, for him. And I can still remember, how humble he was and how fantastic it was to listen to him. And obviously I had to speak to him about, certain players. And one of them was obviously Duncan Edwards, who everybody thought he was absolutely brilliant. But the testament to it was that Sir Bobby, who was a world-class player, in my opinion, he is one of the all-time greats. And basically he said to me in that taxi, he says, Duncan Edwards, he was like even 10 times better than myself. And coming that from somebody that is world-class, a world-class player himself, was testament how he was as a person.
I also think as well, and obviously the anniversary date of that Munich air crash and everything, and through the years, and how, with Sir Bobby still very much connected with Manchester United, the inner strength to remember what for him as an individual was such a very difficult time.
Yeah, everybody that goes through a traumatic experience in life, you have to find the coping mechanisms to deal with those things. And I think for him, the biggest coping mechanism was that the people that survive, including Sir Matt Busby, they have got together and say the only way to overcome this, and we owe it to the people and all those players that lost their lives, we have to come back as a team and stronger and winning things for them. I think that was one of the most driving forces that drove them on and achieve what they did, and it's remarkable, really.
Yeah, it is. Clayton Blackmore joins us now as well, Rene. Evening to you, Clayton.
Evening. Hi, Rene. Okay.
What about?
Hi, Clayton.
Hi, what about? I was talking earlier about how in the early '60s, I'm a young schoolboy, 7 years of age in '66, and the first time I was telling people earlier that I was ever allowed to stay up after 9:30 in the evening was when the European Cup went to extra time at Wembley in '68, which was just one of the great nights of English club football.
Yeah, I was 4 at the time, so I didn't watch it. But obviously, growing up and then obviously coming to United when I was 14, we get to know everything that's ever gone on at the club. And I think that's what makes the club, and I think everybody's very jealous of the club. Everything that's gone on in the past, obviously the plane crash and everything coming through all that, and then still going on to win the European Cup. And, Sir Bobby's an incredible player. He's one of the main top players in those days with Beckenbauer, Pele. The names just rattle off the tongue in those days. And it's a pity for me. I watch a game now and I don't see that's going to happen much longer. I don't see many special players coming out.
Yeah, no, you're right. And Clayton, one thing as well, and I'll ask you both this, that for us watching him, and because we didn't see them very often. It was match of the day. It was whatever ITV region you had, whether it was Big Match or Anglia or whatever, when it came to the Sunday. But then just these odd games. So we didn't see him if we hadn't been to the games or anything. This fantastic shot that he had, of course, which we all saw against Portugal in that World Cup semi.
Yeah, I think that's the best thing about his game. His striking the ball was scary.
And these were different balls, weren't they?
Yeah, they were definitely different. I've played growing up myself with them, and they're very hard to kick. They're like concrete. The balls we use now, the tangos, that changed the game, I think. It's so much easier to strike a ball. David Beckham, I don't think he'll be able to reach them. When he scored that goal against Wimbledon, he wouldn't have done it with the old balls.
No, it was quite ironic that there was Eusebio and everybody talking about him, Rene, who was a brilliant player, of course, as well, and another icon in his time. But Bobby Charlton, just what was the other thing about him as a player? You felt sort of when you looked up to him in a way because he didn't have a lot of hair left by the time he was still a young man.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. I know that at all. I can say that. But the comb over and everything, nothing like that. But in those days, it was, you thought he was much older. He looked much older than he actually was. But he was also, you always could pick him out.
He was I think, and Clayton would probably agree with me, he was like sort of the glue between everything that was happening on the pitch from back to front. He was dynamic. He was box to box. Like we just already mentioned, he was one of the best strikers of the ball. And we talked about the ball, but never mind the pitches. The state of the pitches at that time was completely different from the modern day. He could create goals. He could score goals. He had a fantastic timing in arriving at the box at the right time. He was a complete player. He was even good in the air, and he was just a joy to watch. He was a difference maker. He made things happen.
Ironically, he started as a winger as well, didn't he? I think. Clayton, didn't he?
Didn't know. No comment. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no,
I've only ever seen him playing in midfield.
No, I remember him playing so much in midfield, but I believe it sort of started even with Sir Alf Ramsey wasn't sure that he was the man in the middle for him before the 66 cup final. Of course, in the 71, it was Bobby Charlton, I believe, that was substituted, and in the end we went from 2-up to losing to Germany in that knockout stage.
Yeah, Welsh, so
you didn't care about that either.
That was a good decision for us, but obviously, that just shows though you make the wrong decisions as a manager and you pay it.
Yeah.
You don't take your best players off. For me, always have your best players on the pitch.
I always thought there was a little quote that I liked that somebody gave, not yesterday but before, and actually it was in a song as well. Originally it was fools give you reasons, wise men never try. And for me, that, in a way, Rene, summed up Sir Bobby, because he was at times a man of few words, but at other times when he did say something, it was always important.
Yeah, well, it's spot on. He was a very sort of quiet person, but when he spoke, people listened. I always remember Sir Bobby was always there for the home games. He always came in the dressing room, to wish us well. And he was always in the dressing room after the game. And win, draw or lose, he always had sensible things to say, and people respected him so much. And he always had a quiet word with some of the players and, whether they needed picking up or they needed just to, acknowledging that they were doing great. And it was just fantastic to be in his company.
Did you think as well, I don't know how much of that, I mentioned the Holy Trinity, which was part of his second career, really, because he was there as a Busby babe. He then came back afterwards, and then it was the Best Law and Charlton Holy Trinity together that was extraordinary, really. I mean, it was an incredible three guys who just worked for each other the whole time.
Well, I mean, for me, they're the best players around. And, you know, when you've got players that good on your team, it makes the game a lot easier. The hardest thing is getting the ball to the best players. And if you can do that, you know, you're on the winning streak there. And they were fantastic. And I think the club's always been down that way where we're an entertaining club. We're out there, we're trying to entertain the fans. Obviously, we're trying to win. Bottom line is winning games and winning the league and winning any trophy we can. But I think when we went out, I think that's come from Bobby and all that. It's about entertaining, shooting from distance. The fans love all that.
Yeah.
You know, a bit of entertainment, loads of crosses, loads of excitement in the penalty box.
It was no doubt that he was very close, Rene, to the great Sir Matt Busby, obviously, and they both saw each other through those incredible, difficult times, and they came back with unfinished business, and it was going to be the way forward for them to rehabilitate in many ways with Manchester United. And I understand that he was very much part of, as a director, the bringing of Sir Alex Ferguson as well to the club.
Yes, no, absolutely. And times were so different when Sir Alex came in '86. And it wasn't plain sailing from the start, as we all know. It took some time because, you know, Sir Alex wanted to put his own stamp on the club and changes had to be made. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You're always in the results business. And when those results don't come, people get nervous. But Sir Bobby Charlton has always stood right behind Sir Alex Ferguson, right from the moment go. And even when there were some sort of, you know, difficult times or tricky moments, he reassured everybody else, we have got the right manager here. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to change anything. And he gave that unconditional support, which was so important because, as you know, football can be a very fragile industry where people, you know, tend to make a lot of decisions on emotions. And United never did in the case of Sir Alex Ferguson. And look what it turned out to be. You know, 3 decennia of fantastic football and a lot of success.
And really, Rene, that we won't see that same. There was very few. Steven Gerrard did it, obviously, at Liverpool, but there are very few players that stay as long as he did at Manchester United. These days, it just seemingly won't happen, really.
I mean, the game's changed so much. I was talking to Mark Hughes the other day, and in the lower leagues, players are signing like 1 or 2 year contracts. So, you know, you're moving all the time. That's a weird one for me. But like you said, I think at United it was built in. And I think once you're there, if you're playing enough times, the club's fantastic and you enjoy it. You want to be there all the time. I loved every training session I did, every match I played in. And I think that's the big thing about it. You've got to enjoy football. And when I was at United, I enjoyed it. And I've been to a few other clubs and didn't quite enjoy it as much.
No, there was always that aura, wasn't there? Even when we used to come along, and it was always very early with Sir Alex Ferguson for me when I was at Sky in the cliff. You know, he'd come down and he'd test you and try it on, but you just knew it was all part of what was an extraordinary. It was an extraordinary club, and without the great Sir Bobby Charlton and his brother, of course, for England, the two of them together with their humble beginnings, the sons of a miner and a mum whose family were steeped in footballing history, the Milburns and everything like that, who played so well. That these are just great. These are great boys' own stories, aren't they, Rene?
Yeah, especially the one about the World Cup, because he told me that himself, and it was a remarkable story because they were doing ever so well, you know, in the World Cup, and then they ended up playing Germany in the final, and so Bobby got called in by obviously by the manager saying, "Listen, we play Germany, and they've got one hell of a player called Franz Beckenbauer." and I want you to mark him. So wherever he goes, you go, because I believe at the end you will still be able to make a difference, because I still think you're a bit better than him. And in the German camp, the German coach spoke to Franz Beckenbauer, and he said, well, England has got a hell of a player. His name is Bobby Charlton. I want you to mark him out of the game. You have to stay with him. You go wherever you go. And Bobby Charlton was saying, here I was playing the World Cup final, and I was just following Franz Beckenbauer around, and he was following me around. So we ended up not basically doing what we were good at, and that was the World Cup. But it was such a great story when he told me. I think eventually, obviously England came out on top, which was great.
Yeah. And that '68 winning trophy, Clayton, at Wembley in extra time, when he and Best played such an important part in all of that with those goals and everything. Whatever anybody says, whether they're Scousers or whatever, that night in the '60s, for us all growing up, we were all Man United and Bobby Charlton fans that night.
Of course, obviously the first English team to win it. It was unbelievable. And to be fair, the goals were magnificent as well. They weren't little tap-ins or anything. All the goals were great. And even, I think Kiddo scored one as well. 18-year-old Brian Kidd on his birthday. I don't know if it was his birthday as well.
Yeah.
But, to win that like that, it was like the Holy Grail, really, after trying to get into Europe and, going through the plane crash and everything and losing so many fantastic players. It was a great ending for that.
Yeah. Brilliant, guys. Thank you very much indeed for your tributes, Clayton and Rene.